We hit sex.
I was going to say, let's get back to this conversation.
Is there anything we can work alcohol into this?
Drugs,
I think
rock and roll.
Little alcohol and firearms.
A couple
We got
bottles of bourbon on the desk up there, too.
The ATF will show up here in a minute, and we'll be good.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Company on the Rise, your podcast for entrepreneurship in real time. Not before we did it, not after we did it, but while we're going through it. I'm your host, Christopher Keeney, and today we've got Chris, Rob, and Evan.
Rob in for Becky today.
Yeah, Rob's coming in for Becky.
This will be a much better show.
We got a substitute. All right, today's episode,
She's going to hear this. She doesn't know, right?
We can edit that part out.
That's right. All right, today's episode is going to be on no business sense, or saying yes to anything.
Yeah, which is really what you have to do when you start out.
Yeah.
As we've talked before, and I think you've talked in the photography world about kind of doing that same thing, and it's a completely different mindset from after you get rolling and get established and get going to when you start out, and you'll take revenue from anywhere you can get it,
right,
to help fund the startup and to help fund the
well, in the beginning you do whatever you need to do to survive.
That's right, and so you end up saying, on these sales calls, you end up saying, yes, we can do that, and then you go back probably having not quite the idea of how you're going to do it, and then you go back and say, how am I going to do this, and you end up figuring it out and you do it. And so you run into a lot of those situations. And I know with Haven in the early days, and when Rob, probably the first 6 months you were here, we would sell a job, and the product was still changing a little bit. So we didn't have a full production scale product ready to go. So we were almost making them to order.
It was all hands on deck.
It was all hands on deck. We had everybody in the company that was on payroll around actually this conference table and had all the components that went on a circuit board. Each person had every component, no, that's not true. We each had some components, and we would pass the board around, and you would put your component on, and then the next person would put their component on.
Yep.
It was a true assembly line.
It was a
table was your assembly line.
It really was,
right.
and these components were the size of the pin of a pinhead.
Yeah,
I mean they were tiny.
We had magnifying glasses.
Tweezers.
And everything.
I mean we had tweezers and everything, and so. But it's what we had to do. It's what we had to do to survive, and we couldn't afford to buy a bulk batch of the product. And again, the product was still evolving hardware wise a little bit. So it's what we had to do to.
Yeah, because in the beginning, you guys were creating new products as you were going. Like as you were figuring out what you needed, you would just kind of create it, right?
Yeah, we had an on staff person that designed the hardware and we would tweak it along the way. I mean, I don't know that we were creating the products, but we were certainly tweaking them along the way. And so, we communicate a little bit differently than everybody else with our system, and we were tweaking that along the way. And so the software and hardware combined had to work really well together to make that work. So it's just what we had to do. And I remember. I wish we had a picture, and we don't. But there was a point in time where we had Rob. I think you made it, right? The wooden horse, the sawhorse.
Yeah.
Yep. Rob took one of those and put a torch on it, with duct tape, which fixes everything.
If you can't duck it.
Right.
So. With duct tape, and this is almost embarrassing to say, but we were literally using that as because on these aluminum circuit boards, you had to heat up the entire circuit board. We had ovens for regular circuit boards, but for an aluminum circuit board, which you need for LEDs, you had to heat up the circuit board very evenly and everything. So we had this torch set up to heat up this plate that these circuit boards sat on. And
how did you not set off the smoke alarm?
I impressed the engineers that day, though. I mean, that was ingenuity
with your homemade flamethrower, or
had the landlord come in, we probably would have been evicted, honestly, or the fire department, one of the two.
But that's the thing. I mean, when you're scraping together at the beginning, you're trying to do anything that you can to move forward. And
you're doing anything and everything.
Yeah, and every time you say yes, it brings you a new experience or a new thing to handle.
But I think, and we'll get into this in later episodes, but I think all along the way, those things help create the culture of the business as well.
Exactly right.
And I mean, these are stories that we tell stories like this all the time, and those are the ones you remember. You don't remember the orders that you enter and they go out smoothly and nothing ever happens.
Right.
You remember these kind of times, and and it's honestly it's really fun. It's what I mean. You talk about getting to know people. We had 6 people sitting around the table tweezering components on circuit boards, and there's nothing to do but talk, right? And so you get to know
while you work.
You get to know all your employees and your coworkers really, really well, which I think adds a lot to the culture, and it adds a lot to. And there's something to be said for, hey, I helped build that.
Yeah,
and there's some personal pride that comes into it, and all of it, and so it really brings the company together.
In a weird way, I kind of miss those days because it was kind of like a family, really, like a weird landscape lighting family.
It really was,
it's like. But we're all around the.
But on the other side, had somebody come in and see what we were doing, they're like, "What in the hell are you guys doing?" Right.
I do think it's interesting. Like smaller businesses can get away with a little bit more. I mean, once you get bigger, then you kind of have to fit yourself into that box a little bit more, and you don't get away with all this stuff. Like,
I think there's 2 things to that. I think one is certainly size. When you're small, you can be much more flexible like that. But 2, I think it's how innovative the company is. So if you're pushing innovation, you get a little more leniency on what you're doing. With if you're pushing that innovation forward, you get people understand you're on the leading edge of technology and you're pushing the industry forward. So. So you tend to get a little, not saying you get a complete pass because you certainly don't, but you tend to get a little bit of forgiveness because those in the industry at least, and those following, the customers following you and the customers buying that technology kind of understand. And when you first start out, and we can go over this at some point as well, but you're on this curve of customers, and the curve starts out with early adopters. And these early adopters are used to products like that because just by nature, they want to buy the first. They're the people that are first in line for the iPhone when it comes out, right? And they stand in line for hours.
I did that once.
And then you have other people that don't upgrade their iPhone software for 2 years after it's out because they're afraid of the bug that's going to happen, which absolutely happens. But that's the idea of Apple is especially. Back in the day, 5-6 years ago, Apple was really pushing the technology forward, and the bugs were forgiven.
Yeah,
they weren't a deal breaker, right? And for other companies that aren't pushing technology forward like that, the bugs could be a deal breaker. And so it depends on the kind of customers that you're selling to as well.
Well, and they truly appreciate that too, or can respect the fact that there is going to be some bugs, or there's going to be some things that come up. But as long as you have customer support as your core value,
That's
your customer is going to be lenient, is going to be forgiving and understanding. But you have to have that support, and I think that we do a really good job of that.
I mean, that's the other part of it is. The flip side of that forgiveness that they're giving us is they get a ton back from us because those customers that helped us get started, we still talk about them today. Mm-hmm. And if they ever have any kind of issue, we solve it. No questions asked, no cost to them. Like, you helped us get started, we're going to take care of you.
Right.
And it's, you're giving these people face to face your word, and I think that's probably true in any business, that those people are really, really well taken care of. So there's part of this curve. You've got the early adopters that we started out with early on the technology side, and then we're in this kind of next phase on kind of customers, but we're still this smart color technology, as far as landscape lighting goes, hasn't really crossed the chasm to mainstream yet. And so we're going up the curve. We're past the early adopter phase, and we're in this next phase. But there's this chasm that you cross, that if you can cross it, this thing scales massively. Yeah. And so that's really what we're trying to do, and we can only have so much control over it. And push it as much as we can. But really, from our sense, we really are hoping that the market, and it's actually happening, that a lot of our competitors are coming out with color and smart and everything, and it's different technology, and it's not near as good. But that, we see that as really good for us, because they're helping push this curve and helping it become more mainstream. Because if it becomes more mainstream, we're in a great spot.
Yeah, right. I mean, when we first started, like, one of our biggest hurdles was most people didn't know that colored lighting existed.
And I think that's still the case.
Yeah.
I think that for the most part, that's
especially
still the
for
case.
Exteriors and homes.
I think they know it exists for skyscrapers.
Right.
I don't think most people still today know it exists for your home and what you could do. But it's becoming more and more prevalent. It's becoming more. I mean, when we first started, Rob and I would go around and talk to these professional lighting installers and say, well, how many people have asked you for this technology? And every time they would say, nobody's ever asked me. But yet that was the real opportunity for us, because customers wanted it once you showed them that it existed. They didn't ask because they didn't know it exists. They didn't know to ask. Right. And that's really, I think that really speaks to kind of my concept of marketing, and if you went and asked customers, what do you want? They would have never told you smart color landscape lighting. Not in a million years, because they wouldn't even think about it. They wouldn't even think about, could it happen? Could this exist? And so that's not what we do. We develop products that we want, and we think if we want them, there's a lot of people that will as well.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things, the first day that I came to work here, I was filming you guys doing the product training. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me most was when you said, you never ask a customer what they want. You ask them why they want it. Because if you can figure out why they want it, then you can make a better product than they could even imagine. And that just kind of struck a chord to me, because you're constantly asking, what do you want? What do you want? But once you ask why, that's when you really can get to the bottom of that and figure that out.
You can kind of go above and beyond the initial need for lighting or whatever, and do something better.
Yeah.
But I think this comes back to the point you made, Evan, as the family atmosphere with the company.
Right.
We want those relationships. We will never lose those relationships with our customers. We want to keep that feel. Right. And those conversations that we have with our customers helps us to, generate better products, new products. We get new product ideas all the time, and we're able to, through those conversations, we're able to, deliver that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the challenge for any business is, how do you keep that as you scale? I mean, definitely it changes as you scale. Even for us, it's changed as we scale a little bit. But yet, how do you keep the sense of that as you scale, and keep that brand, and keep that culture that your customers are buying from a company that they feel like they know?
Yeah.
And I think frankly, that's what Apple and Tesla and Amazon and Google have done really, really well.
Yeah.
Is I think you feel like you know what those companies are about. I mean, it's why we made the video a couple weeks ago about the underdogs and who we are and all of that. But it's, you know what Google's about, and Google's, the story of Google and how they started and just do good and all of that, all of that mentality is. And so now I think their challenge is that as they're $1 trillion or whatever they are, I think they're losing it a little bit.
Yeah.
And part of it is because the founder's gone.
Right.
And so as you lose it, and I mean, Apple completely lost it when the founder left.
Right.
Right. And then the founder came back and they got it back. But it completely disappeared when the founder left. So so part of that is size. Part of it is, can you transition from the founder to the next person that still has that same drive and that same culture that continues the business on.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things that I see with Apple, Google. Like, they treat their employees amazing. There's a TikTok going around about a Google employee, and she's filming her day, and the comments are, "Do you even work? What are you doing?" And it's basically like her enjoying herself in their cafeteria or in one of their nice comfy spaces using it, and they made it easy to continue that culture and to keep going.
But I think yes, but the only way you can do that. I mean, I think you've got to start with the premise that people inherently want other people to be happy. I think that's inherent in most people. Probably not all people, but most people. And I think that the reason that Google and those companies are able to do it is because they make a shit ton of money.
Right.
Right. And so I think if any company made that kind of money, they would absolutely do the same thing. The real challenge is how do you make a business model and a structure and a product and a moat as Warren Buffett would say, but how do you make this business so you can do those things and you can attract good people and you can attract and you can treat people really well and make life fun and not stressful and all of that. Now, profit is the only way.
Right.
And you have to make a ton of it to be able to do it.
Right. So, Rob, I know Evan's been on here since pretty much the beginning.
Yep.
And how did you start with Haven? Were you originally at Joe Florida?
Oh, here's a plug. Indeed.com. And if you want to sponsor us, Indeed, you're welcome.
Yeah. So I had been at a former profession for over a decade and was just kind of ready for a change. Everything was going well, but just kind of need something fresh.
Right.
I'd worked for a large corporation for a long time and was ready to get out of the corporate world and kind of looking for something a little bit smaller. And it was a perfect match. Chris and I struck up conversations.
Hold on, let's go back. Why in the hell did you take this job?
Honestly, that's a good question. One, I was way overdressed for the interview. Knowing then what I know now, I would have never worn a coat and tie to the interview. But no, it was just a fit. I could feel it naturally right off the bat.
Nice. So,
I mean, Rob had no business taking this job from when he came in.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. Here's what we're trying to do. We didn't even have the the month that you started, we launched the smartphone controlled system. We didn't even have one in the ground yet.
Oh, wow.
And
we were mostly concentrating on accent lighting and indoor lighting around that time.
It was a huge jump for Rob.
It was. I immediately sensed the environment.
Right.
And Chris sold me on the vision right away, and I could see the long-term vision and possibilities with the company, and let's give it a try. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Similar thing happened to me too. He sold me on the vision, and it was like, okay, let's do this.
He actually said no.
Yeah, that's true. I did.
That's true.
And I called him up after. Actually, it was funny because Krista, our recruiter, said, I've got this guy. He's perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. And then you said, we gave you the offer, and you said, let me think about it. And she says, what are you going to do if he says no? And I said, I'm going to call him. And so that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So you said no, and I called you, and I said, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? I said, this is the perfect job for you. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't truly believe that. I mean, I don't want somebody to come work here that isn't going to be happy. But
Right.
I really felt like that this was the vision that we have for your role and what we're trying to do. I felt like it lined up perfectly with your talents and what you wanted to do and
Yeah.
and
See,
your
that-
creativity and all of that. And I just felt like it was the right thing. And so.
See, I feel like, because I was through Indeed as well, and I had the same kind of corporate background, nice job, no worries or anything, but I needed a change as well. And then, got a little scared, said no, and then, when he called, I'm like, all right, let's do this.
Well, it's like what Becky was talking about in a previous episode about comfort zones.
Yeah.
And, because I also came from the corporate world. I was doing, I was freelance, but I was doing, agency work, and I hated it because it was so soulless. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't any sort of
Passion
to it. And then I was like, oh, well, this is a small mom and pop. It's going to have that passion,
Right.
just off the bat. And, yeah.
My goodness, these are feel-good conversations, guys. How come we're not this nice to each other off air?
Because we got to get shit done.
We should just stay on air all the time.
Wouldn't that be nice? So was there ever a time that you guys said yes and it surprised you in a good way? Like you said yes and you were like, thank God we said yes.
I think it gets to the point that when you do say yes, and you have to know when to say yes, I think is the key there. But
We've said
we
yes
just-
a few times where we regretted saying yes.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true. But I think it's good because you establish yourself for that level of support that you're demonstrating, right? And I think, it kind of gets back to the point early on, we had to say yes to everything. Now we can look at it more from a business perspective, and scalability and what makes sense business-wise. Our customers know now that we're going to go above and beyond with the level of support when they actually need it,
Right.
absolutely need it, I should say, and even beyond that. But if there's times that, hey, this what you're asking here does not make sense, that's, I think, you get that flexibility to say no.
I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into when they've been through business school or they've been through an MBA program or something like that, and they haven't been in this startup world, in the real world. And I think the trap that they run into that's taught in these programs, and I think what's missing is that you make decisions that make no business sense. You make all of us, including our only salesperson, sitting around the room putting components on circuit boards doesn't make any accounting business sense, right? And so, but you do it because you have to survive. And I think people get into trouble when, in the early days, when you're listening to the business people and you're listening to the accounting people, and an accounting person said, "What are you doing? Outsource this." Well, we didn't have the money to outsource it. I was paying the 6 people around the table to work, and that's all I could afford. I couldn't afford $10 more to pay an outside firm to do it much cheaper,
Right.
but it wasn't cheaper because that was $10 more that I had to pay than I was already paying.
Exactly.
So
Right.
while accounting wise it's cheaper, cash wise it's not. And I think there's a huge difference that when you start a business, you run the business based on cash. You're not running it based on accounting. Now that transitions.
Right.
We are now running it based on accounting versus based on cash, but in the early days, you don't have a choice. You're running it based on cash, not based on business accounting principles,
Right.
and that's a huge difference. And I think when people get in trouble, I think that's one of the areas that they get in trouble with is you're making decisions that make sense, quote unquote, in the standard business practices.
Right.
But you got to sit back and look and say, what makes sense for this business and what makes sense for me right now? And a lot of times those contradict each other quite a bit.
Right. And I feel like that's one of those, like, you have to know the rules and then know when to break it. Because, being starting out in the film industry or trying to start out in the film industry, you do that thing where you might get a $2,000 job. So all right, I made $2,000, but then you spent 40 hours worth on that $2,000. And that doesn't give you time to think about future jobs or anything like that. When, you outsource it, you pay somebody $10, they do their part, you do yours, then you make that money and you have time to think of the future of the business, not just right now. And I think that's important for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
So you said that there were sometimes that you said yes and you regretted it.
Yeah, and I will tell you, and I think this is a lesson for us, and we've learned it too many times, and we'll learn it again at some point. Every time we said yes and regretted it, it was a culture mismatch. It just, matter of fact, the two times that I'm thinking of right now, both of those times after the initial meeting, in the car with Rob after those meetings, and both times I literally said to him, I don't want to ever be in that situation again. And then we ended up trying to figure it out because we thought it was a big opportunity in both cases, and we ended up regretting both of them and shutting them down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because it just was not a culture fit. It just didn't match with our core values. It didn't match with anything that we cared about, and economically, would it have worked? Probably. But it would have distracted the company from what really matters to us and to the company. And I think long term, I think those are absolutely the right decisions.
So what do you think of adding a button there? So you say yes, but, because I was reading an article on Forbes, and it was talking about how you should say yes all the time, but add your button there. So if somebody says something that you don't really want to do, you say, yes, but I need you to do this for me to make it work for you. Have you guys ever done that with any of your situations or with any of your clients?
I think in general, we try to always find a way to say yes.
Yeah.
I think that's in general. I think sometimes there's just no way to say yes, and it doesn't work, and it's going to end up being not great for both parties.
Right.
And I think in those times, I disagree with that a little bit, because I don't think the yes but gets you there. I mean, I think in both of these cases, the culture fit was so different that I don't think there was a way that those relationships would have ever worked. And I don't think there was a nobody's fault. Listen,
Right.
I'm not saying that they have a worse culture than us. They have a different culture than us.
Right.
It's certainly,
And sometimes that just doesn't mesh.
sometimes it just doesn't mesh.
Yeah.
And we care about the things that we care about in our business. They didn't necessarily care about the timing of our long-term outlook versus their shorter-term outlook. Both can be right for each company.
Right.
By all means. I mean, there are times where you need to settle down and do look short term. I mean, going back to when the stories that we told earlier, those were short term decisions, right? We're all sitting around the table putting circuit boards together. This wasn't, I'm thinking about how this business is going to work 3 years from now. This is, we have to get this order out tomorrow.
Right.
And so I think just for those reasons, there was no way to the well. There was no yes but. There was no way to the well. I think the yes buts we do pretty well at. Mm-hmm. I think we always try to find a way. To make it work, and so much so that in both of these cases, we did say yes, but and regretted it.
And then
But we've gotten that reputation now too, where people know that we're going to try to work within the best we can.
right. That you'll do
yes,
your best.
we're going to say yes. We're going to try to say yes the best we can.
Yeah.
But we need some help from you guys too.
Right.
Yep.
And I think-
they appreciate that, us working with them in
Yeah.
that fact. And
I mean, it definitely helps. I mean, I think all industries are small when you get down to it. I think there are, even the big companies, at the end of the day, they all know their competitors. They all talk to each other, and word gets around. And I think in all of those cases, word gets around, and it starts establishing or continues to establish your brand and your culture and what your company is about and how we do business and all of those things we really want known and it attracts the people. It ends up attracting people that want to work that way, and it ends up doing the opposite for people that don't want to work that way, and that's okay. That's great. That's fine. There are people that think about the world completely differently than we do, and I think all of that's a good thing.
Right. About how long did it take before you guys started realizing, okay, we're saying yes too much, we got to start saying no?
Has that happened?
That's
the real question.
Oh, I would say maybe a year after you started. Yeah. I would say year and a half after you started, where we started saying, okay, this is scaling. We can start picking our lanes and picking what we do and picking what we're going to be really, really good at.
I think that's the important part, is picking your lane, because, like, so with photography, I started with a $300 used camera. And when I first started with that thing, I would take pictures of whatever you paid me to take pictures of, I'd take pictures, sure. And then we started doing the family stuff. And well, then somebody sent us an email for boudoir photography. And that's
Do what?
Boudoir photography.
Is that in France?
Is that like sexy stuff?
Sexy bedroom photography. Now, here we're living in a bi-level house in Erlanger.
Of course, Evan knows what that is.
Yeah, what? Evan was on it. Now.
Come on.
Come on.
But yeah, so this email pops up, and first thing I do is, wife, is this allowed? And sure, I don't care. Okay. Because the amount that they were willing to pay was quite a substantial amount. So I was like, okay, we'll say yes. And so we said yes. And she came over with a friend and 2 bottles of wine. And it was a very, very interesting session.
Interesting.
This is getting better.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's talk off air after
Interesting.
So session's over and got to edit the pictures and do everything. And I started thinking like, well, okay, this is a way to make a living. I can start doing this. And then I realized, okay, you said yes to this person, but let's think of your actual ability to do this, because you're living in a bi-level house in the middle of a residential area that's not very upscale. Are you really going to start putting ads out saying, hey, women, come to my basement and let me take sexy pictures of you? No, that's not going to work for your brand. So we ended up focusing more on weddings. But once we found that wedding bread and butter, we were like, oh, okay, this is the lane that we need to be in. And then from that, it went from photography to, the photo booth and then the video and all of that stuff. And it's like, once you're in that lane, it's smooth sailing. Until you're then, it's like, okay, sure, I'll try anything.
Yeah, and I think that's what the initial year or however long is about, is trying a bunch of stuff and finding out what fits you and what fits your ability and where the opportunities are, where you see the opportunities, because I think different people see the opportunities differently.
Right.
Somebody else would have saw the opportunity in the other direction.
Right.
And so I think the first year or so is all about figuring that out. I think what I promote to people in that are in my shoes back then is, you got to get in the game to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I kind of use it metaphorically in my brain. Here's how I see it. Since I'm a musician, I think about the times that, I had shows and I had incomplete songs, but I needed the songs to fill out the set. So I would just play them over and over again until they kind of became a complete song.
Right.
And it's kind of, obviously it's different, but that's how my brain sees what you guys are talking about. And that's the different lanes and stuff. And then finally, once you get the song complete, you're like, all right, that's this song is now that lane. Right. And yeah. I don't know.
So it's almost like a feeling, like, I don't know what, almost like butterflies in your stomach. Like, this is right. This is what I got to do.
I think it's more than that. I think it's with anything and why you get good at anything. And I think you get good because A, you like it and you like doing it, and B, because that you start getting good at it, and then it's a cycle, right? Because you're good at it, you like it.
Right.
And then because you like it, you're doing more of it, and then you get better at it, and because you're better at it, and then all of a sudden,
Exactly.
you know, I think that the trick is finding what you can be really, really differentiating at and really good at, and if you can niche yourself up, and we were lucky enough to niche ourselves out into a market that I think we have a lot of talent in, but where our talent was, the market wasn't doing much in that area.
So you
And
almost have to create the market.
We do. We absolutely do, and that's part of the challenge. But it's fun because you look at when we started the business, and you look at Google searches and the history and around color lighting, and I mean, and it correlates, and that may be luck. And
Lo and
probably
behold,
partially
these other companies are coming
and
out.
probably
with color
partially
products.
is, but I don't think it's all luck. I think it's absolutely working.
I truly feel like we're leading this revolution.
It also comes down to like how we marketed when we started. We didn't market like it was more of an educational sale was what we would call it, right? So like it'd be more like we have to tell these people that this exists before we can sell what we have. You know? And so that presented a lot of challenges for sure.
Yeah, and I think all of our marketing stuff is more around education than it is most of our competitors, which is here's our product, buy it.
Right.
And it's a big difference, and it really helps us differentiate our company.
All right, well, guys, thanks. This was a great talk. Rob, thanks for joining us. We really liked having you. We hope to see you again on here.
It's fun talking
Enjoyed
about
it.
the early days.
Yeah,
that's for
it
sure.
is. It sure is.
It's fun to build that culture, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about here soon as well. So, thanks for having us.
All right, thanks. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
It's not always about accounting.
Well, you know, and especially too, you've established yourself as a customer service.
We haven't
based
started
company.
yet.
Oh, come on, man! I was rolling. I was ready to get going.
He was in the mode.
I was feeling.
Man, did you see the switch just
I
go?
know.
I mean,
You're right in the sales mode.
again.
there's the opening right there, or
The outro.
we haven't started yet.
I mean, we're recording it.
I know, but Rob,
We did the fake clap and
I
everything.
could tell Rob was in business mode.
I was locked in.
Totally.
You can see it in his eyes.
I know. For more Company on the Rise episodes, click here to